Okay, good evening, everybody. You're all very welcome to our webinar on the nitrates update this evening. My name is Richard O'Brien. I'm Regional Manager here in Waterford and Kilkenny. I suppose the whole emphasis of tonight, as you see on the first slide here, will be an update on the current nitrates action plan. It's the fifth nitrates action plan, so it's an update on the rules, and that, I suppose, from our point of view, it's our role is to go through the rules involved and the changes that it has and the impact that it has at farm level. We have three very good speakers here tonight from the Waterford Kilkenny region. We have Cathal Summers, who's an ASAP advisor, deals mainly on water quality in County Waterford. We have Eamon Lynch, a dairy advisor in County Waterford, Pat Moyle, a dairy advisor in Kilkenny, and John Maguire is a dairy advisor in Waterford as well, who will be going through questions. So we're going to cover Cathal is going to give us an update of what's happening water quality throughout the region in Waterford and Kilkenny. Eamon is going to talk about the changes, the basic changes across different stocking rates under nitrates, and Pat is going to talk about the impact of banding across on dairy farms. So with that, we have a very big crowd here tonight, and thanks to everybody for turning up. There's to get questions, any questions you have, there's a Q&A box at the end of your screen. There's a Q&A box. Please, John Maguire will be dealing with the questions after each speaker. And so any questions you have, please put them in through the Q&A box. This webinar will be recorded, so we'll have the opportunity to put it up on the local Waterford Kilkenny YouTube page. So we'll share it through Twitter and Facebook, and we'll also send it out to our clients across the region via text. So with that, I'm going to kick off with Cathal, and Cathal is going to set the scene for us as regards water quality in the region. So thanks, Cathal.
Lovely, thanks a million, Richie. Okay, I'll just put my video on so you can see me. You can see me okay, you can? Lovely.
Yeah, you're good, Cathal, yeah.
Perfect, thanks a million. Look, so I'm going to set the scene. So I'm based down in Mulnavat office, but I work in Waterford, the county I work in. So I support farmers across the region in, I suppose, trying to improve the water quality and reduce nutrient loss to rivers from the farms via farm management practices. So I'm just going to go through a couple of things there just to set the scene for the day. Okay, so just to give you a rundown on, I suppose, national water quality figures, and just to give you an understanding of the reason why there's such a push on regulation at the moment, and a little bit of panic in the air, I suppose, from the EPA as regards water quality and why all this is happening. So if we look at the water quality report, this is based on results from the EPA water quality all across the country from 2016 until 2020. And river status are defined by a number of different ways. If you think of it like a 5-star hotel, so 1 star being very poor quality water, 5-star being best of the best. So if you look at this circle here on the left-hand side, you can see anything that's in red, orange, or yellow, that's not to the quality that we need it to be. We need all our water bodies to be in the green and blue section. So what this means is blue is the best water quality in the country, really high quality water. Green is good water quality, which is acceptable by Europe. But when you get into the yellow and the orange and the red, that's moderate, bad, and poor, and we don't want that. And we have a target from Europe by 2027. All this left side should be either green or blue, and that's where the regulation's coming from. So if you look here on the right-hand side, we have a breakdown from the different water bodies in the country. We have rivers, lakes, the transitional waters, there are estuaries, and anybody particular down on the Waterford side will be familiar with the estuaries and what we'd often hear of algae blooms at times, and the coastal water bodies out by the sea. But just looking at the rivers here, it's kind of a similar story. Kind of half our rivers are not to the required standard, and we have to, I suppose, put the shoulder to wheel as farmers trying to correct that. Lakes are not as bad. You're only talking about maybe a little bit over a quarter. The big worry, I suppose, that the EPA have announced this year is these transitional, the estuaries, where they're disproving. You can see there that there's a good chunk. There's, up on not quite 3/4, but getting close there of issues with the water, and that has to be turned around. Just down here in the bottom right-hand side, this kind of gives you just a kind of a overview of roughly the way water quality trends have gone since 2007 all the way up to 2021. I'm just going to zoom in a bit closer to give you a bit of a look on that. Just to show you trends, I suppose, just looking back at 1987 all the way to 2021, a couple of major things happened in that time, and you can see it in the way water quality has changed. So all the lines on the blue here is the number of really high quality, pristine rivers in the country. So that's something you can nearly stick your head in and drink water out and be clean as a whistle. The ones in the green is still very good quality water, and exactly what I said a minute ago, we want all the rivers by 2027 in this category. Unfortunately, you can see on the right hand side here that we have a lot of yellow, orange and red, and the red ones are bad water quality, very, very poor. You're talking about life is not great in them, only very few creatures and stuff would live in it, and you get a lot of algae and that kind of growth in it as well. The one trend I want you to look at here, if you remember, anyone that's around a while now, you remember when the nitrates regulations were put in place, we can see that there was actually improvement in water quality. So we saw the number of these water bodies were getting better, and we're in this period of time here, actually there's an improvement. And then around that time, 2010, 12, 13, some people are starting to say now that potentially that the removal of the quota may have impacted that. And from that time, that water quality has disproved a bit. So we need to change that trend back to the right hand side again. And one question that I'm often asked when I'm out on farm is who's the big culprit? And we often get, I suppose, the finger pointed at us in the farming industry because we are the biggest contributors to water body pollution or water quality pollution at 63%. Hydromorphology, which is, I suppose, land drainage and dredging, and the actual physical makeup of the river is the second. And you have things like forestry, wastewater treatment plants, sewage connections, all that kind of stuff afterwards. And you may ask yourself, why are we getting the finger pointed? And the reason being is just because we own most of the land. We farm most of the land mass, I think it's up around 70%. And because we work most of the land, it's just natural that we're probably going to have a higher impact on water quality. I'm not going to stay too long on this slide, but just to give you a brief background, and I'm sure you're quite familiar with regulation. A lot of our regulation, because we're part of the EU, comes from the EU Commission. So the EU has developed what's called a Water Framework Directive, and the Water Framework Directive covers drinking water, bathing water, and urban wastewater. Okay, but the one that comes under that umbrella for us is the Nitrates Directive. It's the one that's important for us. In order for us to comply with that European regulation, we have to protect and enhance all waters, as I've said a minute ago, achieve good status by 2027. So that's the blue and the green section that I mentioned, and manage water bodies on a catchment scale. So up till now, in the last couple of years, we've always done it on a national level. So one rule across the whole country, but we've discovered that works okay, but not well enough, because different parts of the countries need to be managed in different ways. So we select certain areas or catchments where all the water flows in a certain area, like a parish size area, into one river or one area, and that's a catchment. The River Basin Management Plan is just like a how-to book that Ireland has developed on how to actually solve these problems up here. So some of the newest River Basin Management Plan objectives are focusing on the problematic areas. We call them priority areas for action. There's 190 of them in the country, where the EPA selected areas that need some improvement. And it's the right measure in the right place. So if you're up in the Midlands and there's no problem in the rivers of nitrogen, you don't focus on trying to fix nitrogen problems there. You focus on what the problem is in that place. So for us down in the southeast, and I'll discuss in a minute, it's nitrogen. So that's the one we focus on a lot. And the last thing that came out, I'm an ASIP advisor, and you can see here at the end that the ASIP advisors were set up back in 2018, and that was a part of that River Basin Management Plan. And I'll talk about that more in a second. Just something interesting I want to show you. So people often ask me, where does Ireland sit as regards European water quality? So are we the best? Are we the worst? Where are we? Well, the answer is we're right in the middle of the table here. So we're not the best, we're not the worst, we're right in the centre. Do we want to be in the centre? Not really. I suppose we have the impression of a green image, and that's what we sell in our industry when we produce our meat and our milk. And that's what we want to target, getting our water quality higher as part of that. The other thing, I suppose, to bear in mind, we talk about derogation a bit tonight. In 2025, we'll have a review of our derogation again, or when I suppose the Department of Agriculture has to go and apply for another derogation in Europe. But after 2025, would you believe there's actually only 3 countries, Belgium, Denmark, and ourselves, will be in derogation. That's considering we hold on to our derogations. So only 3 countries, and you can see Belgium and Denmark are much higher up the ranks than us. So we're standing out a little bit. We're kind of paddy last and in regards to water quality and holding on that derogation. So just to bear that in mind. Just a quick, I suppose, rundown on what ASSIP is. So it's the Agriculture Sustainability Support and Advisory Program. As I mentioned, advisors like me, there's 20 Teagasc advisors across the country. There's 37 advisors total because 17 of the advisors are also dairy co-op. So Tirlan would have a number of advisors in ASSIP down around, and I'm sure some of them have been on your farms already. Our focus is on improving water quality in those priority areas for action. That's the 190 areas that were selected, I mentioned. You might ask why 190? That was just a starting point. They could have selected hundreds more if they wanted, but we started in certain areas. We go into the areas, help farmers, and try and figure out problems and support them to try and find solutions. The one main thing about our service is it's free and confidential service. So when we go on farm with you, you'll know if we're working in an area because we'll have contacted you via letter or maybe even phone call or call into you. But if we call into the farm gate, it's completely confidential. So what we discuss inside the farm gate stays inside the farm gate. So that's very important to us. And what happens is when we go for a visit with you, we'll walk the farm with you. If we see any areas, it's land management, nutrient management planning, and all that kind of stuff, the farmyard stuff. If we see anything that we think might help, we'll design a plan for you and leave it with you. And look, it's voluntary. You don't have to do the actions, but obviously it'd be beneficial if you did. Last thing before I move on is we work with LawPro, which is a group of about 50 catchment scientists. So they actually learn all about the rivers and what the issue in the river is, where the issue might be, and they kind of target us to certain areas and say, work in this area, this is the issue in the area, help the farmers there, but we don't share the detailed farm information with those scientists, and we keep that to ourselves. And just these are all the people involved at the bottom. So we're funded by the Department of Housing, Department of Agriculture, and that's all the co-ops that are involved there as well. So I suppose, look, the 2 big bugbears, I suppose, of the country, there's 3 kind of, but the 2 big is phosphorus and nitrogen. But we're just going to focus really briefly on phosphorus and the issue around it, why it's such a problem. A very, very small amount of phosphorus can pollute a river. I'm talking about a handful. So a very, very small amount. And really with phosphorus, it only affects areas that are heavier soils, that the water doesn't infiltrate down very well. You know the type of land they're talking about. Some farms will have free drain soils, some will have heavier soils. And it's when that rain comes down the hill or comes down across your field, and it takes that fine particles of clay and runs it into the river. If you ever see that brown water coming out your gate or into a drain, that's full of phosphorus, full of sediment, and it's a strong pollutant. And that's why you'll hear a lot about people installing buffer zones to protect those area around drains and rivers. I suppose the whole idea is the source is the fertilizer or the slurry or the actual clay with the phosphorus particle in it on the field. And if it washes down a pathway like this into the receptor, which is the river, we have a problem. We'll often hear about critical source areas, and you'll see this time of year, especially anyone who's gone out with a slurry there in the last couple of weeks, there's certain areas in the farm you should never target with slurry at times of the year when there's potential for rain, just in case there's a flood or a runoff event. Nitrogen on the other side is a different beast altogether, and that's the one that I suppose we have to focus on more down here because we have much, I suppose, more free drain soils, much more productive soils. We can push our soils a bit harder because they're drier. We can have extended grazing seasons. We can get out early on with machinery. The problem with nitrogen is it's not like phosphorus. Phosphorus binds to the soil and it'll sit in the soil unless it's physically washed out. But in fact, nitrogen doesn't do that. When nitrogen gets into the soil, it sits in the soil, but if a heavy shower of rain comes, it'll actually wash it downwards down into the groundwater. So unless the grass or whatever crop you're using at the time doesn't utilize it in time and you get rain, it'll wash straight down. And once it goes beyond, you know yourself, that 10 to 15 mil or centimeters, it's gone beyond that root zone. So we lose that nitrogen and we don't want that bleaching to occur. You can see here, often farmers ask me, where does the nitrogen go? I'm not near a river, I shouldn't be a problem, but it doesn't matter if you're right beside a river or if you're 20 miles from a river. If nitrate goes down, it'll get into groundwater and it'll pop back somewhere in a stream. So it'll get up somewhere. So that's why you don't have to be beside a river for nitrate to be an issue. Just want to show you a quick snapshot of this. I know this might be a little bit hard to see, but this is Dungarvan down here. You're all Waterford, and then back up into Kilkenny here on this side. This map is it's called a pollution impact potential map. It's on a website called catchments.ie, free website for any farmer that wants to see it. This is any rivers, and I showed you about the reds and the oranges and the greens and the type of rivers you want. All the rivers here, these are all the rivers in this area. Anything in red and orange has an issue with it and needs to get back up into the green. So it's either bad or moderate status or poor status, and we need to improve these rivers. So you can see there's a good bit of work to be done. The asset advisors, myself, I work in Waterford. Deirdre Glynn is the Kilkenny asset advisor. You can see here I work down in the Glenboy, the Clodia, the Tay, Colligan Bricky, the John, so all around Waterford City, all throughout Waterford, all the way over to the Cork border and Tallow. And Deirdre works there around the Douche, the Brega, the Brownstown, the Dinan and the Uina. So if you're in one of those areas and you can avail of this service, I'd advise you to do so, because now more than ever before, you need that support to try and fix water quality, just to protect our industry going forward. This is an important one. You can see all these triangles going up here. Any farm I go to visit, I can show them exactly where the EPA monitors water. So every green triangle there is where the EPA monitors water quality, and all that data goes back into the EPA, which is fed back to Europe, and that's where what's decided. That's where rules and regulations are made, depending on how the water quality is in each of those triangles. So they're monitoring points. Just a quick map. The one on the left-hand side is called a nitrate pollution impact potential map, and the one on the right-hand side is called a phosphorus pollution impact potential map. And basically what it means is anywhere where there's very dark purple colors, your land has a higher potential to lose nitrogen. So and on the right-hand side, anywhere where there's the darker blue colors, your land has a higher potential to lose phosphorus. So you can see here down in our area here, there is quite a lot of that dark purple, all the way really from Dublin all the way down to the Cork here. And in the southeast, we have that free drain soil type that's prone to that nitrate loss. So it's up to us to manage that, to avoid that situation happening. 3 things affect that. The climate, we cannot control the climate. It rains when it rains, that washes nitrate out. The soils, we have heavier soils, we have free draining soils. So depending on your soil, you're dealt with the hand you're dealt with. But what we can do is manage our land use in a certain way to reduce the impact of those nutrients on our rivers and water bodies. Quick one just to show you on that catchments.ie website, and I'd encourage you to have a look at this yourself. And like I said, if you're in an ASAP area, for myself and Deirdre, give us a shout and we'll do this for you on your own farm scale. This is just a random map I just zoomed in on, anywhere at all, no particular farm at all. This is a river here. This is the farmland around it. I can do this down to field scale, down to your own farm. Pull up those maps, and this is free to you to have a look as well. This is the pollution impact potential for nitrate. So it's telling me all this purple area around that farm is very susceptible to nitrate loss. The bit on the south of the farm is not. So when I'm discussing management, we'd focus on this area for nitrogen. For phosphorus, it's telling me that there's no issue on this side with phosphorus, but there is an issue with phosphorus on the south side. So that's where we focus our attention on. So remember what I said, to start right measure in right place, not to be wasting your time or our time. So that's the trick to this one. This is a really interesting one as well. So when it rains, it predicts where the rain flows into the river. So remember what I said, the north side of the farm is free drain soils, no problem with phosphorus or runoff losses. But the south side is heavier soils because it's more prone to phosphorus loss. And you can see when it rains, the water tracks down through the fields and ends up in this red line, which is the river. And often we try and block these pathways or the critical source areas where potentially if you put slurry out there to the shoulders here, it could get washed in if the rain goes against you. And lastly, you can actually click on the river itself when you go onto that website, catchments.ie, and it'll actually tell you your own water quality in your own river at the end of your farm, which is very good. You can see here just a quick one. Nitrate here is up around 5, which is over the limit. The limit should be around 2.6, and phosphorus is okay. It breached once, but it's not too bad in general. So Richie, that's all I have for you.
Perfect.
So if you have any
Thanks a lot,
questions.
Cathal. That was very comprehensive. Thanks a lot. And just when Eamon is getting ready, and maybe John might have a question or two as well. Just one question. When will water quality results for 2022 be published by the EPA?
Yeah, so there will be water quality results out later this year, and it will feed, it could be into the summertime, but they have it done. It's going to feed in, I suppose, to the review of the Nitrates Directive as well. The problem about bringing water quality results out in 1 year is you can't trust 1 year. That's why you will always see water quality reported kind of between 2016 and 2020, because it's not a fair reflection or an accurate reflection over 1 year. So that's why you'll always see it from 18 to 22 or 16 to 20, but they will be out later this year. We were at a conference last week, and Jenny Deacon from the EPA said they'll hope to have it out about June.
And John, there's a good few questions coming in. A few there.
Yeah, just two quick ones, and we can get maybe one more at the end to Cathal. How do I find out the status of the water in my area, or to find out where the monitoring points are, Cathal?
Yep. So for that, the best thing to do is, if you're in one of the ASIP areas that I mentioned, you can avail the service, and the ASIP advisor will help you with that. If you're not in the ASIP, I would say go to the website called catchments.ie, so catchments.ie, and in there you can look for, you can actually put your own air code in. It'll bring it to your farm, and there's filters on the top of it where you can actually find out all that information. Now there's a bit of work looking around for it, but once you get used to it, you'll find it.
Okay, and the last one there, what role does protected urea have in water quality?
Yep, so initially protected urea was brought onto the market for gaseous emissions to reduce nitrous oxide and ammonia losses. However, protected urea is actually, urea, I suppose, is in the form of ammonia nitrate, okay? So if you compare protected urea with CAN is half nitrate and half ammonium, and urea is all ammonium. Okay, so that the nitrate part of CAN is very prone to leaching. So if you put a load of CAN out in the first application of the year, and you get the weather against you, a lot of that, the nitrate element of the CAN can be washed out. Whereas protected urea is in a safer form in ammonium, where the ammonium will actually bind to the soil better than nitrate. So what happens when it hits the soil, it binds to the clay particle, and then over time, when the microbes start to work, straight away it'll start to convert it to nitrate. And look, the minute it hits the ground, it's usable for the grass. It's a little bit safer. It doesn't leach as quickly as CAN. So that's the benefit in water quality.
Thanks, Cathal. I think we'll leave it at that for a minute, Richard. We'll get more back then later.
Yeah, perfect. We'll move on to Eamon, and we'll have more questions for Cathal later. Yeah. So.
Okay, so look, as Richie said at the start, I suppose, look, I'm going to cover the changes, I suppose, to nitrates, I suppose, across the board from 2023 on, especially in relation to, I suppose, stocking rates. I suppose up to now, I suppose we've been dealing with kind of above and below 170 kilos of organic in, but now with, I suppose, the changes to the regulations, there's more divisions or bands within that we have to, I suppose, pay more attention to with regard to the rules. So look, how I want to do this presentation is to kind of, I suppose, first of all, look at the issues that affect all farmers. So regardless of stocking rate, and then try and build it up in layers based on your stocking rate. As your stocking rates increase, what additional rules affect you. So I suppose, look, what affects all farmers, and then the new, I suppose, stocking levels that have come in, or the breakdown of stocking levels that have come in above 130 kilos of nitrogen per hectare, above 150. I suppose, look, the existing above 170 kilos of nitrogen, and then the irrigation farmers. And look, nitrogen phosphorus allowances at different stocking rates. They will vary depending on your stocking rate. Also, I just want to mention the revision in spreading dates around fertilizer and slurry, and a little bit around changes resoiled water. And I suppose, look, we're being asked questions all the time about low emission slurry spreading, and you know, who has to use low emission slurry spreaders. And look, I'll cover that and how that's going to change over the next while. So I suppose, look, the issues affecting all farmers, irrespective of stocking rate. Look, some people, I suppose, look, you'd have to go back to a couple of years. 2001, there was a new regulation came in there around waters, which was in the 2017 nitrates derogation, the fourth round of nitrates. And look, we were building up to that for a couple of years, and then when it did come in, I suppose look, a lot of farmers would have been aware of it. Other farmers maybe weren't aware of it. But just to, I suppose, go back on it. So you have to prevent runoff from roadways. All farmers have to do that to what's defined as waters. So waters are defined as anything that can convey water. A dry drain, watercourse, anything at all that can carry water is waters. So this affects all farmers. It's not just dairy farmers or dry stock farmers. So it's tillage farmers as well. And I suppose, look, in simple terms, the roadway needs to be cambered away from these waters or drains or watercourses. And look, that came in the 1st of January 2021. There's specifications on that, on the camber and everything else, which can be checked online on the department website, or you can talk to your advisor. But just to be aware of it, that affects everyone, regardless of stocking rate. I suppose the new stuff that I suppose that's kind of coming in and changing a little bit this year, and just updates on it. So this affects everyone again. So round bale storage. So if you don't have proper effluent storage facilities, you're limited to stacking your bales a max 2 high. And then you have to keep at least 20 meters from surface waters. And that includes if you were storing bales in around a farmyard that was in 20 meters of surface water. So just to be aware that if you have proper storage facilities, it's okay, you can stack bales higher, but without proper storage facilities, you need to limit it to 2 meters and keep back 20 meters from surface waters. Another one that a lot of people aren't aware of is buffer zones for chemical nitrogen. So in the last nitrates regulation, it was a 2 meter exclusion from surface waters. That's increased to 3 meters now, that you keep back 3 meters from surface waters when spreading chemical fertilizer. Slurry spreading, look, I suppose the slurry spreading, the regulation was phased in from the 11th of March last year, and there would have been, you know, most people are aware of the date went to the 8th of October from the middle of October last year. The close period started from the 8th of October. This year, it'll be from the 1st of October to the 12th of January, which is a fair length of time, you know, where there's no where slurry can't be spread. So I suppose the requirement in zone A, which we're all in here, is 16 weeks is your minimum storage requirement. So if you say your tanks are empty from the 1st of October and you work a 16-week period, just physically look at the days, that'll bring you up to about the 20th of January. So it's a very tight window. I know we can go out on the 13th of January if conditions are right, but if you can't, 16 weeks is only going to bring you to the 20th of January anyway. So look, I suppose what we would be saying is that anyone planning storage facilities in the future would you know, build in a bit of a buffer there when doing so. Chemical fertilizer, then the rule has changed again this year. You can't spread chemical fertilizer. The close period was up to the 26th of January. That's in. So it's only in the last couple of days that you can actually spread chemical fertilizer. But look, a lot of the research there would say there wouldn't be a huge benefit, especially the price of fertilizer now, in putting out fertilizer before that date anyway. And that runs, the open period runs up to the 14th September. And that hasn't changed on the other side. Soil water, then I suppose, look, this is can be a contentious enough one around farmyards where, look, there would be, I suppose, lower levels of existing soil water tanks and that sort of thing. But look, for 2023, there can be no spreading of soil water between the 10th of December and the 31st of December. So a 3-week requirement for storage, and then from 2024. With the exemption of winter milk suppliers, it's a month there where there can be no soil water spread. So in effect, you need a full month's storage at that stage. And then winter milk suppliers, so all milk suppliers by 2025 will have to have a month's storage. And look, I suppose last year there was a 10% reduction from the 11th of March on fertilizer allowed. And look, I suppose talking to farmers and looking at fertilizer plans in general, most farmers are pretty well able to work in that space. The issue is down the road, if there's additional cuts, I suppose it's going to become harder. But look, just to explain the ban, so I did mention at the start that you know, above 170 and below 170 was kind of where we were working previously. But now you can see on that table that you've got a new, I suppose, range of stocking rates where we have different fertilizer allowances. So below 130 kilos of organic N is about 114 kilos of nitrogen allowed per hectare, in that 131 to 170, 185, and then you can see above 170 and in irrigation, I suppose, is critical there at the different stocking rates. It maxes out at 254 kilos of organic in that 171 to 210 space. So look, there is a 10% reduction across the board at all those stocking rates, but the allowances at the lower stocking rates now are enforced by the regulation. Also, look, I suppose there's a lot of talk around the new fertilizer database at the moment. It's not in place, but it is coming. When, I'm not 100% sure, but there's no doubt if we were talking this time next year, we'll be looking at it. So look, it will be coming at some stage this year. There's a new fertilizer. There's a Fertilizer Act from 1955 that's been amended. It's going through the Oireachtas at the moment. So look, it's likely that this will probably come in sometime in the middle of the year. At the moment, it's not in place, but look, just to be aware of it. It'll be recorded at source, be linked to a DFM, the department database, and you'll have a link some way to your herd number, and you'll be given a fertilizer number or registration. It'll be similar to the chemical registration. So look, it's just to be aware of it. We'll be talking to you more about that as it's brought in. Still continuing on the factors that affect everyone. I suppose, look, there is the big one that's kind of, I suppose, has helped a lot of farmers up to now, has been the ability to export slurry from their farm to, I suppose, to get to a stocking rate, or at least to allow them to stay within a certain stocking rate. That's becoming more and more of an issue now. And when the regulation changed there from the 11th of March last year, the actual the content of, we'll say, a cubic meter of slurry changed from, we'll say, from a nitrogen perspective, from 5 kilograms of nitrogen per cubic meter, and that's gone back to 2.4. So half the value, and the P level has changed slightly as well. So what does that mean? Basically, it means if you were traditionally at we'll say a fixed stocking rate, for example, we'll say, I'll show you in a minute, but that say you had a requirement to export 50,000 gallons of slurry to get to a stocking rate maybe below 170, for example, kilos of organic in. Now in the future, from now, you'd have to export twice the amount of slurry because the value has halved to get to the same stocking rate. So look, maybe you can do that, maybe you can't, but I suppose the issue might be on the other side, the person taking the slurry from you, because it's similar to buying chemical P or chemical fertilizer. They might be limited on what they can take from you. So look, just be aware of that. It mightn't be as easy, I'm not saying easy, but mightn't be as straightforward as it was previously. So you might have to export more to get the same result. So look, I suppose from a soil sampling point of view, if you are continuing to do that, even while it's not mandatory, soil sample for at a certain stocking rate, there will be cases where you will have to do that. So any farmer that's taken slurry from you above the 130 kilos of our organic N will have to have soil samples if they're going to take slurry from you. And look, anyone below the 130, it's not a requirement yet, but look, you can assume index 3 for phosphorus, but at lower stocking rates, the phosphorus they can take in is very small anyway. So the advice would be, I suppose, for anyone that's taken slurry from you to soil sample their farms to enable the calculation to be done properly. So look, I suppose that's very important. You will need to go, if you're doing it, go and check with the person that's taking the slurry from you at from now on, because look, that calculation will be very important in the future. I suppose, look, up to this slide, it was all the measures affected all farmers. I suppose now we start to look at the new rules that are being brought in at different stocking rates. So anyone stocked above 130 kilos of organic in from this year on, there's additional requirements for them. So we'll deal with the 130 to 150 first. So this is very important, because when we look at our I suppose our client base, we'll see that we have a lot of farmers in that space. Like I suppose traditionally, we were dealing with irrigation, very high stock farms, and we had a lot of farmers in that space too. But now there's a fair group of farmers within this space, 130 to 170, we'll say, for example. So if you're going to be buying chemical P from now on, you'll need to have a soil sample to show that you can purchase it, and that'll be all linked into the fertilizer register as well. So what does that mean? So if you don't have a soil sample, or at least no soil samples within the last 4 years, you're going to have to soil sample to enable you to spread chemical P. So it's every 4 years is the rule, and a maximum sampling area of 5 hectares. That's not an average of 5 hectares. That's a maximum soil sampling area per soil sample. So if there is soil samples on the farm dated after the 15th of September 2019, they're still valid within the 4-year rule for this year. 16-week storage requirement is there, as it is for everyone, for bovines. And the new rule that's been brought in for the 130 on top of the soil sampling is that from the middle of September, and this is here already for the irrigation farmers, but from the middle of April to the 30th of September, if you're buying ration, your crude protein in ration for mature stock over 2 years of age, including dairy cows, can't be more than 15% in the crude protein from the middle of April. So just be aware that if you get a cross-compliance inspection, they will be looking at it. And for the 130 farmers above 130 in that space, 130 to 150, you'll have to use low emission slurry spreading from January next year. Will be a requirement for spreading slurry. So I suppose if you move up to the next category, it's the 150 or above. 150, we'll say to 170 in this case. So all the things I spoke about up to now again affect those farmers. But the one addition there that's kicking in this year for 150 to 170 is that the low emission slurry spreading kicks in from this year. So anyone above 150 kilos of organic in has to use low emission slurry spreading from the 1st of January this year, plus everything else that I said already. So I suppose the next category of farmer is the 170 kilo stocking rate, so 170 kilos of nitrogen per hectare or above it. So I suppose dealing with the 170 or above that aren't in derogation, because you can apply for derogation above 170, but a lot of people choose not to. There's about 5,000 farmers in the country don't go into derogation that are above 170. So what do those farmers have to do? So at the moment, this is the requirement for above 170. So above 170, not in derogation, the 170 is calculated prior to exporting of slurry. And I suppose all these stocking rates are based on 2022 figures, so we can't do anything about them now. They're affected by what you did last year. So just remember that, whether it's 130 or the 150. So in this example, if a farmer was stocked at 180 kilos of organic in 2022 and then exported slurry to avoid penalties, and exported slurry and got to 160, they're still considered to be above 170. So it's grassland stocking rate before slurry movement or exporting slurry. So what is required? Mandatory lineman is required. So if you get a cross compliance inspection, you have to have a lineman plan. So if you have a lineman plan, you have to have soil samples. So that's a requirement for farmers above 170, not in derogation. And the other one which comes in here, which wasn't or isn't a requirement below 170, is that water courses, and they're these blue lines that are shown up on the OSI maps, 1:5,000. You have to have, your fence has to be 1.5 meters back from those. So 1.5 meters from the top edge of the bank back, and it can be a temporary fence. And there's no drinking pints allowed. And if you have water trucks, they have to be 20 meters back from those. So 1.5 meter fencing, no drinking pints. You can cross them, but you have to put up the gate handle behind you as you cross them, after you cross them, and you have to keep your water court or move your water trucks back if they're not already back. So maps, they're generally, if you look at them, they're the main channels on farms. Not always, but generally. But look, if you're in doubt, you can ask an advisor, or you can go into the OSI website and you can actually view them there. So then derogation farmers, and what affects derogation farmers, I suppose, in addition to other categories. So if you're stocked above 170, you have the option to apply for derogation, which there's about 7,000 farmers in the country in derogation this year, or up to this year. We expect a lot more farmers probably to go in, because we'll be going through, the next person to speak, Pat Moylan, will be going through the bands, and I suppose, look, there will be more people looking at derogation now because of that. So I suppose, look, what are the rules around derogation farmers on top of what I've said previously? So there is compulsory training. Anyone in derogation would have done training courses. They're probably looking the last 2 years. And look, that's ongoing. As new farmers go into derogation, they'll have to do training. If the training is already done, you don't have to do it again. compulsory grass measuring and recording for people in derogation up to now will be required. 20 measures is what the department have published there in the last couple of days. So look, that's something that is an evolving process there. And look, we obviously it's a very important part of decision making on farms, and I can kind of look, we can understand why it's in it. Inclusion of clover when reseeding is there as well. 0.6 of a kilo naked clover per hectare has to be put in a mix, or at least part of the reseeding program can be stitched in afterwards, but it has to be within the calendar year. Farm biodiversity measures as well. So there's a schedule there around hedgerow maintenance and that, which will be in your plan. No ploughing, that rule came in last year after the 31st of May. I suppose refers to reseeding. Again, it's to do with what Cathal was talking to you about in relation to nitrates leaching and that. So it's just, and I suppose greenhouse gases as well, it's important. And I suppose, look, the one that probably most of us are no problem with this one, with the 50% slurry applied by the 15th of June, is there no spreading of livestock manure after the 1st of August prior to reseeding, and a compulsory submission of fertilizer records. So any of the measures we would have spoken about up to derogation measures here, you don't have to submit accounts on an annual basis, whereas in derogation you do. You must have adequate storage, which is the same as for everyone. No imports allowed. That's very important. So you can't import organic manure onto your farm in derogation. You can export, but you can't import. And the last one, look, I just threw it in there, restricted commonage allowance for stocking rate purposes. It probably won't affect anyone from Kilkenny on this call, but we would have good few farmers in Waterford now that would have commonage. And whereas they would have been allowed a stocking rate up to the 170 kilos of organic in previously, that's now limited to 50 kilos of organic in. So that will have an effect where there's commonage on farms. It will affect the overall stocking rate. So look, we've spoken to a lot of our farmers about that already, but just to be aware of it. And look, finally, I suppose, look, the most important things here, I suppose, individually, we can talk about this in relation to farmers and groups of farmers and, statistics and everything else for counties and the country. But I suppose, look, my advice here is that everybody needs to look at this in their own situation, where your stocking rate is, where you sit in relation to the tables and what I've went through already, and how the regulation is going to affect your farm. And look, it needs to be done now. If you haven't already spoken to your advisor about it or looked at it yourself, you need to do it, because soil sampling for me is going to be a huge issue when this fertilizer register comes in, if farmers happen to soil sample in place and they get an inspection. And look, finally, the legislation, look, all this legislation, as Cathal said, has been driven by water quality issues. So look, we need to make a very strong joint effort to try and improve water quality in the short term. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Eamon. Thanks for that. While Pat's getting ready there, and John will have a few questions as well, I'll just throw a few questions are coming through. Why would a spring calving dairy farmer that goes completely dry for December need soil water storage for that month, as there are no parlour washings, etc., to collect?
Yeah, I suppose the soil water requirement, the regulation is very clear on that with regards to the requirement. Look, the soil water is an issue all year round. It's not necessarily an issue in December. But look, I suppose the critical period for December is, I suppose that's, and Cathal would probably explain this better than me, but that's where your biggest problem is going to be from a nitrates, phosphorus, water quality point of view. And look, you can have a month of wet weather at any time of the year, where you can't maybe go out on land, depending on your location, soil type, everything else. But look, that rule has been phased in now, and I'd say a lot of it is down to the actual I suppose, look, the risk in that period. I'd say even if you are dried off, and a lot of farmers would be dried off, and they're right. But look, it's still potentially an issue at any time of the year. So.
Yeah, it's not just for that month, basically.
No, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. Okay, John, have you another question? Well, Pat.
Yeah, is it not counterproductive that it's not mandatory for all farmers to fence off water courses, and not just those in derogation or over 170 of a stocking rate?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I suppose, look, as the rules are evolving with the National Action Plan, look, you could say the waters definition for roadways makes sense. And you could, the person that asked that question is 100% right. Why that isn't compulsory for everyone, I don't know. Maybe Cahill might have something to say about it, but I presume it's down to the load and the stocking rate loading on farms and the risk, I suppose, at the higher stocking rates. That's the only reason I can give for it. But it's a good question, yeah.
It's probably a matter of time anyway in terms of
I'd say
moving
so,
down
yeah.
that direction in
Yeah,
general.
yeah.
Question there as well. How do I prove that I sowed clover as part of my derogation requirement if it fails in a reseed?
Yeah,
Oh,
so yeah, that one does come up a little bit. And look, last year and probably 2018, where we had droughty weather and it was difficult to get clover to establish. Look, once you have a receipt for it, the department are happy then. Once there's a receipt that the clover was purchased and you can show that within the calendar year, you're fine.
Okay. Another one there, do existing derogation clients have any new courses to complete in 2023?
Yeah, so it'll be the same courses that I would have mentioned. So they'll have to do the environmental training course and the nutrient use efficiency or the OP build-up course. And
But say, I think it's in relation to existing, say someone who's in derogation with the last few years.
oh, sorry, yeah, no, they won't
Yeah.
have to do any courses. So they'll have to do the 20 measures. So last year they had to do a grass measuring course. They won't have to do that this year. They'll have to do the 20 measures. Yeah.
Okay. There's
the one on concrete base. All silage bales have to be stored on a concrete base. I think you mentioned too high, that the bales can only be too high. Does it have to be on a concrete base?
No. If it can be stored out in the field but like can't be more than too high and has to be 20 meters from surface waters. Yeah.
Okay.
And one more there. Can you explain in more detail the rule about no manure spreading prior to reseeding after August 1st?
Yeah, so I'm not 100% clear on that now, whether the lads can fill us in a bit better on that one, but I presume it's to do with I presume it's to do with the risk at that time of the year when you're actually cultivating ground, the risk of runoff. Yeah, I didn't delve into that one too much now, John, to be honest with you. Now, but maybe some of the lads might have a better reason for that. But I presume it's the time of the year and it's cultivating late, and I suppose spreading slurry and the risk of runoff at that time of the year. Yeah.
Okay. We might move on to Pat, Rich, and we'll get the last one or two at the end there.
Yeah, there's loads. Keep the questions coming on the Q&A at the end, and we'll move on to Pat. Okay, Pat. Banding.
Okay. Thanks very much, folks. I'm the last speaker tonight. You might be glad to hear. So look, I'm going to look at the 5th Nitrate Action Programme and the big area of dairy cow banding, which is causing a lot of confusion out there. And then I'm going to look at a real example of a case study of a farmer in my own Northwest Kilkenny area. So the first table here, first of all, is just a bit of background information. I suppose the question comes up, first of all, where does banding come from, or why do we need it now? Well, really, the EU Commission, looking at the water quality trends in Ireland, came back to the Department of Agriculture saying that we need to look at the different dairy cows, for example, in Ireland, and see have they all the same level of nitrogen and phosphorus outputs. So the department then did a study, and we arrived at banding, where we now have 3 bands. And as you see there, this table here shows you nationally what the bands are currently and what percentage of farms in Ireland are in different bands. So I've highlighted there in red that in 2021, 15% of dairy suppliers in Ireland were in band 1. In other words, their average milk yield sold per cow was less than 4,500 kilos. So I'm just saying sold per cow because it's not the milk recorded yield per cow or the produced per cow, it's your milk sold per cow. As you see, 2/3 of farmers in the country are in the middle band between 4,500 kilos and 6,500 kilos, and 19% of farmers nationally are above 6,501 kilos. You might say, what's a kilo, what's a litre? 1 litre is approximately 1.03 kilos. So the upper band, as we see in the next table, is anyone whose average milk yield over a 3-year period or in the year preceding, which is 2022, was actually over 6,313 litres of sold milk per cow. So the table is showing, I suppose, the proportion of bands or farms in band 3 is increasing over time, and that's testament to good breeding. And you see there's a large range of farm type and technical fishery within each band. So that's just a background table. Maybe that is the case for Kilkenny Watered area. If we apply to the Kilkenny Watered area, you can obviously look at what the percentage looks like in your own discussion group, but that's where this thing has come from, the base assumptions. The higher the milk yield output, the higher the organic N and P output. So this table, which hopefully you can see there, explains just in summary what the bands are. So band 1 is where your 3-year average milk yield, and this year we're talking about the year 2020, 21 and 22. If the average of that is below 4,500 kilos or 4,370 litres of milk per cow, well, your organic nitrogen calculation from now on will be done at 80 kilos per head per year. Currently, before the change came in on the 1st of January, just gone, all dairy cows in Ireland were at the one band of 89 kilos per cow. And that has gradually been increased over the years, going back over the last 10, 15 years. You can also see there in green the organic phosphorus content. Band 2 is where your average 3-year milk yield, or the yield in the previous year, is between 4,371 litres and 6,313 litres. And that organic nitrogen loading will move from 89 kilos to 92 and 13.6 for the phosphorus. And then band 3, if you're over 6,500 kilos of milk sold per cow, or 6,313 litres, well, then you're going to move to the higher banding of 106, which obviously is a huge increase from the current figure of 89 per cow. You'll also notice there too that the phosphorus is increasing in line with yield. So the banding reflects the increased organic excretion of organic nitrogen phosphorus as yield increases. So look, the bottom point there, I suppose, where is this going to come from, this yield? It'll be based on the co-op average milk yield, which will be a 3-year rolling average, or farmers will have the choice of picking the yield of the previous year. And ICBF will provide the milk details, and the Department of Agriculture will provide the 365-day average cow numbers from the AIM system. It's not the end of month averages. It's not what you might see on your ICBF co-op performance report. It's the 365-day, and that is currently the way the Department of Agriculture calculate organic nitrogen stocking rates. So as you see on the next page here, this is a draft or an illustration of what the page would look like on your ICBF page. And we'll talk about the options available if you're not on ICBF. So the department are working in conjunction with ICBF on developing a page for each farmer that's on Herd Plus or on ICBF, first of all, .com, where you'll be on one page, you'll be showing your 3-year average yield. You'll see the number of cows each year, the total litres sold, the total kilos of milk, and then you'll see, as the thing is highlighting at the top of the screen there, what is the average over the 3 years. So that's will show you here. So if you decide to pick the 3-year rolling average, you'll be ticking the box at the top part of the page. And then also a bit of flexibility was introduced there in December, where you could actually pick the last calendar year. And that might be to your advantage, where the milk yield sold per cow in 2022, for example, was not above 6,313 litres. So farmers are going to be asked on an annual basis to go into icbf.com, and they must select either the 3-year rolling average figure for banding or the previous year milk supply. Now, this has to be done by a specified date. That date is not yet known by anyone in this country. There was speculation in the press about it being the 14th of February. That date has not been confirmed. And when it is, I'm sure it'll be widely publicised. So if you don't make any return to the department, you will be allocated by default to the highest band of 106 kilos of nitrogen per cow. That's an important thing to remember. For those on the call or farmers who are not engaging with icbf.com, we are told there will be a paper certification letter sent out to suppliers who will have to go to their co-op to get their yield certified over the 3 years, and then they'll have to return that, and the department will apply the average stocking rate or cow numbers over those 3 years to arrive at the banding figure. So that's just an important point there. If you're not set up on icbf.com, there will be a paper option. But again, we don't know any more detail than what we can tell you tonight. This is an information meeting, and there's no mention of a specified date as things stand, as I'm speaking to you here tonight. So what I'm going to do now, just to conclude a bit on the banding, I'm taking an example here of current clients of mine in the Northwest Kilkenny area. So just to explain what the farm is, it's a typical farm of 68 hectares, 168 acres. So in 2022, this farm was stocked at your typical maybe 1 cow per acre or 2.4 livestock units per hectare. So that correlates to 210 kilos of organic nitrogen per hectare. And the stock numbers that are planned for this year, 2023, are 130 dairy cows and basically 32 0 to 1 and 32 1 to 2 heifer replacements, plus 3 stock bulls who are all over 2 years of age. So really, it's I suppose, a simplified dairy system, which is quite common in the Kilkenny Waterford area. From ICBF, we know at this stage that the milk yield per cow of sold milk is 6,342 litres, or was in 2020. It was 6,380 litres in 2021 and 6,400 litres in 2022. So as you can see, the 3-year average for this herd is in excess of the 6,313 litres. And also the 2022 year is also in excess of the 6,313 litres. So this farm will be allocated to band 3 at the 106 kilos of organic nitrogen per cow, up from the current 89 kilos per cow. So what we're going to look at here now, I suppose, what are the implications and options for this farm in the current year, 2023, and in 2024. So I suppose just to repeat that the data will be all up on the ICBF. It's not milk recorded yield, it's yield per cow based on the number of cows on the farm from the department's AIM system. So the first thing I'm going to bring you through, hopefully you can see this page, is a little ready reckoner that I put together there that we have available within Chagas on Excel, where we just list off the cow, the planned stock numbers. So you see the 130 dairy cows, the 32 naught ones, the cattle 1 to 2, and the cattle 2 plus. So maybe the first point to make is that the other livestock on your farm, their organic nitrogen per head figure is not changing. Those figures have been there since derogation started back in 2006, and we talk about calculating organic nitrogen stocking rates. So what is changing here, as you can see at the top, because this farmer is in band 3, the dairy cows are going to be calculated at 106 kilos per head. So what's happening here is that we're multiplying across 32 by 24 for the 0-1 cattle, 32 by 57 for the 1-2 cattle, the 3 bulls, and then the 130 cows at the top. So that gives us a total organic nitrogen production of 16567, 16,567 kilos of organic nitrogen. Again, when you ring your agent or look up your BPS online, there's a nitrates table there under the tab of farm details where you can look back at any time to see your previous nitrate figures. And the nitrate figures for 2022 are not as yet finalized by the department. Look, the next thing then, what happens is that your BIS, or your basic payment scheme, which is now will be called the BIS. So the land that's used in the calculation is only the land that's on your BIS, your old BPS application form. And I know for some farmers out there tonight that is not the true area of land they're farming. And that conversation maybe needs to be had with the owners of the land, where there's land that's not for various reasons on the single farm payment. And that might be an issue for some farmers to talk about this year. So we divide the total organic nitrogen by the hectares. And for this farm for 2023, we're getting an average kilos of nitrogen of 244 kilos of organic nitrogen per hectare. Remember I said to you earlier that in last year, with the other calculation, this farm was at 210 kilos of nitrogen. Now he's moved up to 244. So how is he fixed for 2023? There's no problem in 2023 because the derogation upper limit is still at 250 kilos of nitrogen per hectare. So there's no adjustments needed under land, cows, reducing heifer numbers, or slurry export. That's the first point to make. Now, as we mentioned and Cathal referred to it earlier, we are told, or being told, that the department have to make a submission to the European Commission by the 30th of June on water quality for the years 2021 and 2022. And if that report comes back, which is due to come back, I think by the 30th of September of this year, if that report is not showing an improvement, well then it's in the legislation that the derogation upper limit will move down from 250 down to 220. So this little ready reckoner here is showing, if this is the curve for this farmer, He'll be 1,607 kilos over the organic nitrogen limit to be under 220. So what are the options? And these are just options to look at with your advisor and see what route may you go. So this is saying one option here is to get an extra 7 hectares of land to bring down the stocking rate below 220. Another option that's looked at here is, in this case here, it means a possible reduction of 15 cows off the farm. And maybe there's a number of cows on the farm that can be identified through milk carding, low producers. So whether a cow is given 300 kilos of milk solids or 600 kilos of milk solids, she is still a cow on the farm at the 106 rate individually. So the banding is not done per individual cow, it's based on the average milk yield of the cow in the herd. The other option that's put up here is maybe people might look at contract heifer rearing. So this little calculator is indicating that 20 heifer units, which would be 20 naught to ones and 20 1-2s, could be, if they were moved off farm, that would also bring you in compliance. And the final option here, and I think we spent a good bit of time on here, is slurry export. So look, the whole area of slurry export is really tightening up. The nitrogen has halved, as you know, and getting farmers who can take that level of slurry, and while slurry has a very high fertilizer value, like that slurry there being exported off the farm would have a fertilizer value close to €8,000. So this is just a little show, one or the other, and really people will have to sit down with their advisor and see what do you think is the best route to go. Might it make sense to take in extra land? Can you get it, etc.? And just do the sums for your own farm first. There are so many farm situations out there. It's very hard to give a carte blanche or one recommendation for everyone here tonight. The last slide here, the second last slide, is looking at those options just in words, I suppose. I won't go into it in detail. There's pros and cons for taking extra land. Obviously, the pros maybe that the stock rate on the farm maybe is gone too high anyway, and you're spending a lot of extra money on purchase forage and concentrates. So maybe this will realign your stocking rate. Obviously, the cons, what will it cost, the rental cost and the running cost? Will it add additional workload, distance from the home yard, and the big one, of course, the availability of land. Reducing cow and stock numbers, again, may align your stocking rate with your grass grown on the farm. Maybe it will reduce labour requirements on your farm, and obviously we'll have to look and do the sums on will it reduce farm income. So I think the point should be made that I think this is not just one thing, which is extra land. This could be like solving somatic cell count, that this could be, there's no one magic bullet, that you may have to look at one or two of these options and tie them in with what you think will work for your farm. The third one there, contract heifer rearing, it does reduce labour requirement, it does simplify the system, but obviously then there's a biosecurity risk, of moving animals in and out of the herd, finding a technically efficient rearer, and also it will incur a cost. But don't forget, if you keep those heifers, you don't keep them for free on your own farm either. And look, the last one that's just put up there on exporting slurry, we can do the calculation, but it's a significant loss to the farm of NP and K. Can we find a farm? And as we said earlier, Eamon has reinforced that the nitrogen content now is at 2.4 kilos of nitrogen rather than 5 kilos per cubic meter up to the 11th of March of 2022. Look, as I said earlier, just coming to a close here, the other thing, as I said, each year a farmer will have an option to look at the milk yield per cow in the current year as regards next year. So if you're saying, okay, I want to be lined up for 2024 and I don't want to be in the high band of milk production and the 106, well, these are just a few options maybe you might look at to see, can you bring down milk yield per cow? Does it suit your system? Feeding whole milk to calves, maybe you bought an automatic feeder, so maybe that mightn't be considered. We know meal feeding increases milk yield. Does it increase profit? So reduce meal feeding mid-season. A lot of people talk about keeping the cull cows on the farm for longer, because that will obviously be included in your average cow number, but don't forget the cow is on the farm as well, producing her own organic nitrogen. And have you got the winter forage and the winter housing to do that? And then some people maybe who are teetering around this 6,200 to 6,400 litre bracket, will look at these options, and maybe they might decide to dry off a little earlier or do some one-stay short term in this early part of the year, and maybe in the period right before drying off, but I think early part of the year. So look, they're just, without going into detail, management strategies to reduce milk yield in the year. You have to see, is it feasible to do that, to try and aim to be in band 2 rather than band 3. And Richie, I suppose to summarize a few things here then, it is part of the regulation now, it's in. The banding will be determined by a 3-year average or the preceding year. You have the choice each year to pick that and make that submission by a date yet to be announced. The maximum allowable lane in 2024 will be dictated by the Water Quality Report of September of this year. And really individually with my clients, I'm sure everyone on the call, you need to contact your advisor and do your own individual calculation. So what should farmers do next? Calculate your individual nutrient density per hectare under the new regulations for the current year. And if the 220 limit was to come in next year, and then as I've outlined tonight, there are a number of potential management actions to consider, but you do need to speak to your local advisor to discuss the feasibility and economics of each of these for your farm. And I suppose in all this talk tonight about regulation and this, that, and the other, at the end of the day, the question has to be posed: what are we all going to do individually on our farms to improve water quality? Everything I spoke about tonight is banding, it has stock rate implications, it has chemical nitrogen implications, but look, all the other things that Eamon touched on there about slurry storage, soil water storage, spreading protected urea, there's an awful lot that we can do that we're not doing currently to improve water quality. That's what's going to drive the future of Irish dairying. And the last slide, I suppose, a lot of us here tonight are in derogation. What are the implications of banding for derogation 2023? So for some people on the call, banding will increase the organic nitrogen per hectare, maybe above 170 per hectare for the first time this year. And maybe you have to consider the option of entering derogation for the first time. So if that is the case, the derogation deadline is the 31st of March. It's not so far away. If you think you need to be applying for derogation for the first time, please contact your local Teagasc office in Kilkenny, Mullavat, and or indeed Dungarvan as soon as possible. Number 2, banding on other farms who are in derogation will increase the organic nitrogen above the current derogation limit of 250. That's something that needs to be looked at because the cow has gone from the 89 kilos to the 106. The derogation deadline, to remind us all tonight, for the submission of fertilizer accounts for last year and to apply for this year's derogation is the 31st of March. So quick reminder that if you haven't submitted your information to your derogation planner, and really suppose contact your Teagasc advisor or your private planner and do this figure for your own farm. A lot going on there on banding, but hopefully I've given you a quick summary of what's likely to happen, or what is going to happen, or what is in law for the year 2023 onwards.
Okay, Pat, thanks a lot for that. I'd ask all speakers to come back in there, put the cameras on and come back in. While they're doing that, Pat, there's a few questions there, similar type questions on, how stock are calculated on the department system and on the ICBF system for the banding.
Yeah.
Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah. On the ICBF system, generally it's end of month figures that you'll see on, for example, the Co-op Performance Report, or indeed any stock report under ICBF. So that figure is an end of month figure multiplied by 12 divided by 12, multiplied up and divided. The actual department's figures have always been done on a 365-day average on the AIMS system. So look, I suppose if maybe a lot of people in the call tonight are dairy farmers, and maybe after the culls are sold in the back end of the year, the springtime, and the heifers have settled down, the stock numbers can be fairly, comparable, but really it's a 365-day average that the department will be using in conjunction with the milk yield data from ICBF.
Okay, and I think you answered this, you talked about this, but there's a couple of questions coming through on when will the information be up on the ICBF? Is the page now open on ICBF? It's a similar question.
No, as we speak, it's not. What I showed you there was an illustration provided to us by department officials last week, just to help show people what is on the cards, but there's nothing set in stone or nothing open yet on the ICBF platform. And maybe if people are not on ICBF as we speak tonight, it might be an action plan for tomorrow morning to go online or ring up ICBF and get set up on ICBF, because it brings a lot of advantages to farmers: herd recording, getting access to data, and also submitting your banding request.
Okay, John, there's loads of questions coming through, and I'm going through them there as well.
Another one there, I'll answer this one myself there. It's a quick one. Has the organic nitrogen produced per cow relative to our milk production been proven through Teagasc trials or European average? That's a simple answer. It's been proven through trials. How How long would it take, Pat, for a farmer to get back into Band 2 if he was under 6,500 kilograms in this coming year? I'm assuming that's in relation to the example you put up there. Like, would it be on a 3-year average, or?
Yeah, well, look, he'll have two. That person will have two options. If, for example, the dice is cast for this year, 2023, because the 2022 year is over and the 3-year rolling average is over as well. But the farmer might be looking at this potential drop to 220 in 2024. So he'll be allowed this time 12 months to pick the 2023 average milk yield per cow or the rolling average of 21, 22 and 23. So really a farmer has options. Some of the things I spoke there about trying to bring down maybe milk supply, he can maybe, if it's feasible, he can achieve that in this current year to reduce meal feeding, shorter lactation, and the things I mentioned there. But if a farmer is looking at a 3-year average, obviously it's going to take a long time. If he's way over the 6,300 litres, I don't think that's a feasible option to reduce a milk yield to try and get into Band 2. He may need to look at some of the other adjustments on the farm.
Yeah, that's a fair point. What are the implications if somebody becomes TB restricted and are battling with the upper limits?
Always the case is that if you get locked up with TB, with the department, the nitrates calculation clock actually stops. So while your table on your BPS online might show you're well over the 250, if you're restricted, for example, for 3 months out of 12, none of the animals on the farm are counted in that 3-month period in reality. The department do all those adjustments when the year is actually over.
Okay, and I'll just give you one more, Pat, before I move on to a question for the other lads. There's two kind of linked questions with regards to the whole idea of the value of the slurry, or maybe Eamon might comment, kind of, I suppose, what's the basis of the slurry being halved? The two of them are kind of looking at that, I suppose, or
Well,
what implication that has for people in general, like farmers on the call.
The reason that the nitrogen content has been halved from 5 down to 2.4, because an awful lot of analysis that was done by farmers and other state agencies over the last 1 or 2 years has showed that the actual nitrogen content is closer to 2.4 than to the 5. And that's where the department have come from. They've done actual analysis on their own farms, research farms, etc., commercial farms, laboratories have all these results. So that's where I read somewhere why it was reduced to reflect the actual reality.
Thanks, Pat. This is another one, maybe Cathal might be able to come in the water quality possibly. Are we talking ourselves into the derogation dropping to 220 in 2024, which is next year's limit? Is this not based on water quality results for this year? And will the limits be catchment specific, or will they be across the board?
Yeah, so look, we're certainly not talking ourselves into it. It's completely based on science and results. The Department of Agriculture actually go to Europe to argue for our derogation. They're not actually trying to get rid of it. So we're certainly not talking ourselves out of it. It's completely whatever the results show, especially in that review in this year. Sorry, what was the second part of the question,
John? Will it be catchment specific, or will it be, say, if there was some reduction, like will it be across the board, or will it be in areas where the water quality might be worse or not improving compared to other areas?
Yeah, so the Department of Agriculture and EPA are very focused on those priority areas for action that I mentioned, and the pollution impact potential maps that I mentioned to you as well. So we can really clearly show in Ireland where the hotspots for pollution is in certain nutrients. However, the Department of Agriculture, we've asked them the question, they're considering their options at the moment. Potentially they could target certain areas, however, it'll be very hard for them to police. So they're trying to weigh up all their options to see what system would work for them. So we really don't know yet, but potentially what we don't really want, it wouldn't make sense to have a kind of rule across the whole country. That doesn't really make sense. So they're looking at that option of looking at zones, but look, it's very much up in the air as we speak.
Yeah, thanks, Cathal. Question in there, will it be possible to watch this webinar back? It will, Richie, won't it? This will be recorded and it'll be put up.
This will, will be recorded and it'll be on our YouTube channel, and we'll text it out to all clients, and it'll be up on social media as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of figures that people want to go through again.
Yeah, there is. And I think I had one written down from earlier. Well, it was actually just in relation to you, Cathal, as well. As a dairy farmer, what simple action or actions can I take to improve water quality in the short to medium term?
Yeah, look, I presume a lot of people on the call here are reasonably intensive, maybe in derogation. So the biggest threat to us, to our industry going forward, is the nitrogen issue, especially this part of the country. So if you're looking to solve the problem as quick as possible, the best thing you can do to start is try to reduce the amount of chemical nitrogen that we apply on our grasslands or on our crops from now. Put it at the right time, the right place, minimize the losses. So for a long time, when fertilizer was cheap, we were all able to put out a little bit more insurance policies just in case. We can't do that anymore. We can't afford to lose nitrogen to the rivers. So target that this is your New Year's resolution, to reduce the amount of chemical nitrogen using. Obviously, we still want you to grow the same amount of grass, but lots of webinars, and your advisors will do the same. There's lots of opportunity via the type of fertilizer you use, the time you do it, the use of clover, the use of your slurry. Using those correctly can save that nitrogen that you reduce back in your spinner. But the simple message is try and reduce the chemical nitrogen. That's the first step. And the second one is go back to the basics. Make sure your slurry storage is correct, that you have enough slurry storage for your animals, and not just enough slurry storage for the exact amount of animals you have, but you always need a buffer there. We would have always said 20-30%. I was in a conference last week where the Department of EPA are calling for a 50% buffer. But we know, like years we've had this year, the winter was complete washout. People got caught out. That means your tanks are full. We're putting out slurry at the wrong time. We've gone through the figures on the concentration of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium in slurry. And you know, it's a valuable compound. We want to get into our grass. We don't want it to go into our rivers. And I'll go back to what Pat said again. If we don't get this right very quickly, you know, we're putting a lot of pressure on ourselves going forward with new regulation.
And at current prices, Cathal, I think I saw a figure, 1,000 gallons slurry is worth too much at current price of fertilizer.
€50 a 1,000 gallons. So yeah, you go out with it. You go out 2,500 gallon tanker. That's a lot of money.
€125 a load.
Yeah, you know, there was a famous David Wall always says that would you go out in the close season or even on the shoulders years with 18,612? No, you wouldn't. Like, we want to get best bang for our buck. We want that nitrogen or that nutrient in the plant, not being washed away.
Just on the farmers over 170 and traditionally been over 170 and have exported slurry, it's going to be more difficult now to export slurry. And this is for AIM in the past, could be more difficult. What's the advice to those farmers over 170 and have stayed over 170 and we're exporting slurry to stay out of derogation? What's the advice to those farms?
Yeah, I think, look, Pat has said it as well. I really think they need to look at derogation. Like, look, I think there's a decent bit of flexibility when you're in derogation. You don't have to be worrying about your stocking rate and exporting slurry and everything else. Look, I think just to get over that, but look, I suppose the most important thing, and I suppose something that's kept people out of derogation up to now, is slurry storage. And look, if there's still a slurry storage issue there, you need to address it first. But look, I think don't be afraid of derogation. It's there as a tool that can help you.
Because the old derogation rules are now passing down nearly to all farmers.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Look, I would just add to that, just contact your local Teagasc advisor and we can do a quick screening phone call with you even over the phone about derogation and maybe take some of the mystery out of it. But derogation allows you to farm at a higher stocking rate. So it does actually obviously allow you to increase the output and profitability of the farm. And that's what people have to think about as well.
Okay, perfect. John, any final questions?
No, I think that's it there. That's all I have here, Richie. I hope we answered everyone's question.
Yeah, I think we've got through most of the questions there. Thanks to everybody. We're on over an hour. I think that's enough on that. There's a lot of figures, and as somebody asked in the Q&A, all this is recorded and will be available to everybody. And the presentations, if anybody wants a copy of the presentations, we can pass them on as well. Thanks to you for coming on the webinar. Thanks to all the speakers. Best of luck to everyone out there. The calving season next while. I know people are getting very busy at this stage, so best of luck with that. And thanks to everybody again. And in the background, I better thank Zoom 33, Mark Trimble, for keeping the whole technology. Technology is great when it works, so it's great to have somebody in the background to keep it working. Okay, thanks to everybody.